Greetings and welcome to Mount Olympus. I am Hercules Invictus, and tonight on Living Mythology, I'm proud to bring you Brian's Drive-In Theater with the epic and legendary Brian J. Walker. Greetings, Brian. How are you?
I'm well tonight, Hercules. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. I'm looking forward to exercising after tonight's conversation.
Perfect. I just got off the treadmill about, I don't know, 45 minutes ago, and I'm still kind of sweaty. It's humid here today. I don't know about where you're living, but
Here in New Jersey, too, it's been kind of raining and it got a little chilly before, but the nights have been like sweltering.
yeah. And I'm at the, I guess it's menopause, but I'm at the age where I wake up sweating,
I
and,
recommend too.
and it doesn't matter. I mean, it doesn't time of year, temperature in the room. God knows when we were at Disney, our friends Martin and Kelly kept the condo like to like sub-zero conditions. You could have stored raw meat in that place. Um, and I woke up every night, my hair wet and everything. So I guess it's the menopause.
I went down to Florida when we were doing science fiction conventions, and we had like a guerrilla theater type of thing going with science fiction. And Florida like sucked all the moisture out of me as soon as I got out of the whatever transportation vehicles we were using at the time, buses and cars. And you had to stay indoors and had to keep the air conditioner on high, otherwise it was unbearable for New Yorkers anyway to be in that type of circumstance.
Well, we went to Epcot 2 days, but one day we were at Epcot, it was 98 degrees. And
Wow.
well, everything is bricked or paved or concrete. I mean, well, there's a lot of flowers and stuff too, but the walkways and everything are all paved, and they just absorb the heat. And even at like midnight, if you're there for extra magic hours or something, it's still just sweltering hot because everything's hot. Um, and Regarding amusement park rides, I thought we would go ahead and do our second part of amusement and theme park rides and attractions that are based on films and film franchises. And also in the mix, I wanted to throw in some films that are based on amusement park rides, which gets kind of tricky. And I wanted to touch base on some films that were shot in amusement parks. Today's movie of the day at the drive-in is The Incredibly Strange Creatures Who Stopped Living and Became Instant Zombies.
I love
And
the title.
it is a great title. It's a fun movie, and it was shot at the Pike Amusement Park in Long Beach, which apparently is also long gone. But
It's a great idea, and I liked the first part of this particular episode. And I've been thinking a lot about amusement parks and amusement park movies. And I remembered back when Star Wars came out in the late 70s,
mhm.
there was a ride in Wildwood or Westwood, one of the something W Woods in New Jersey along the Jersey Shore that had a Star Wars ride where you went on the Millennium Falcon.
Hmm.
And unlike rides before then that I'd been on, this looked like the you were inside the Millennium Falcon, and people dressed in costumes came in, and there was like a space battle, and then you landed, you crash landed, and the screen had communications from the Empire and from the Rebel Alliance, and you made your way through like corridors. There were like a labyrinth, and there were Jawas, and there was a cantina like in the first movie. It was totally immersive, and it was quite enjoyable. So I imagine since the 70s, they've evolved a great deal with the CGI we have now.
They have, and the ride you are describing sounds to me like a simulator. You mentioned the screen. Uh,
Yes.
the simulator rides were really popular in the 80s and 90s because it did give you an immersive experience. But now the simulators are combined with actual movement, um, like a roller coaster or something like that. So those rides are really impressive because they are just completely immersive. You can You can feel the wind rushing through your hair, and as you're moving, they've got fans blowing on you to make it feel like you're going faster than you really are. But some of these are, indeed thrill rides. And we talked in depth about Disney last week because that's where I was at the time. But I've got to say that Universal Studios, both in Hollywood and Florida, really provided more fodder, even more than Disney, in terms of rides based on films. Unfortunately, most of these rides are gone now, but Universal used to have Kongfrontation. It was a really cool ride where you're on an aerial tram and King Kong comes up to you and starts shaking your tram.
Oh, wow.
It was all low tech animatronic stuff. It looked good when it worked, but I think it was a maintenance nightmare, and they took it offline pretty early on. I remember riding it though, like in the late '80s or early '90s, and just loved it because it was so cheesy. And King Kong's face looked really good. Whoever was working on this through the art department was burning the midnight oil because it looked great. It was clearly mechanical though. The way things used to move, like this, CGI has smoothed a lot of that out. Universal had another attraction called Disaster, a major motion picture ride, which was essentially Earthquake, the movie, the disaster film from the mid 1970s. And one of the things in some of these rides, whether they're based on films or not, is that they usually are the pre-show before you get on the ride. And the pre-show anymore is as much of the ride as the actual ride is, really. But the pre-show is often hosted by an actor from the film,
Mm-hmm.
or maybe just a really good character actor. For example, Charlton Heston hosted Disaster, and it tells you how old that ride is because he's been gone for many years. But he hosted the Earthquake or Disaster, a major motion picture ride. They also had an attraction, at least in the one in Florida. I don't know if California had it, which was Jaws, and they took you out, into the bay, and then this animatronic shark. There again, lower tech stuff, very mechanical, would come at your boat. It looked good though, and it worked sometimes, as I recall. The ride seemed to be down. That is one thing about these rides. These super complex rides that seem to defy gravity also defy repair because a lot of them break down a lot, unfortunately. Back to the Future was also a ride at Universal Florida, and I think Universal California had that too. Christopher Lloyd is the host of the pre-show with that one. And the actor who portrayed Biff, and I cannot remember, he's been in a million things, but I cannot remember his name right now.
North can offend.
But he's also in the pre-show, was in the pre-show, I should say, for Back to the Future. It got wiped out a number of years ago, and it didn't really get wiped out. It was really reformatted into The Simpsons. So it became a Simpsons ride with all the same technology. It was just reformatted as such. Now the Simpsons ride I thought was terrific. It was really cute, very funny, very well done. But it's my understanding that that's probably on the chopping block now. And we're talking about attraction that's about 35 years old in total. So I mean that's a long time for
That is a long time.
They also had, and Greg reminded me of this just yesterday, that they had an attraction called Twister. And Twister was not as much of a ride so much as a demonstration of pyrotechnics and how studios can fake weather for certain scenes. And it was hosted by Helen Hunt and Bill Paxton. And I don't know how long Twister lasted, but I'm pretty sure it's gone now. The only original Florida Universal Park attraction based on a film that's still there is E.T. the Extraterrestrial Ride.
And that's
Um,
been around for quite a bit too.
it's 30, some years old. The ride is, and a well-known hater of E.T. the movie that I am, and I haven't been to Universal for several years at this point. I love the ET ride. It is just so cheesy and corny, but cool. You ride the bicycles, and there again, it's kind of lower tech now compared to some of the newer rides. It's sort of suspended. Your bicycle is by an overhead track, and you fly through the town trying to get ET and whatever the kid's name was, wherever it was they wanted to go. I can't
Oh,
remember. Can't remember. Well, yeah, yeah. I remember that much about the movie. Oh God, it's awful. Um, but Universal used to be called Ride the Movie. It was their tagline in Florida was Universal: Ride the Movies. It's not anymore exactly, although they still have some attractions like Men in Black, which is sort of a shooting gallery ride where you and your friends get into the same car and you shoot at targets, and you get to see who has the highest total. It's fun. There's a lot of rides in Florida like that. There's one in the Magic Kingdom called Buzz Lightyear, and it's the same thing. It's you get to see. There's a bit of animation. Most of it is just sort of animatronic.
hmm.
You get to shoot at targets and see who wins, and it's fun. It's in the spirit of competition. I'm not competitive at all. Um, Maybe I should be, but I'm just not. I don't. We played cards a lot while we were gone, and I just don't care whether I win or lose. It's fun to play, but I'm just I don't have any competitive spirit. I never really did. I don't know if you did or not, but
No, not really. I kind of I'm pretty comfortable with who and how I am, and I pursued my career without competition. I was who I was. I did certain things well. I had certain skills, so I just went for positions, and my career went very, very well. And in sports, I chose things like weightlifting and sports where you're not really competing with anyone unless you enter contests, which I didn't do. It was just competing with yourself, just to get better all the time.
yeah, that's what works for me. And I know what you mean about sort of having an inner peace, not really needing to be competitive. That's kind of the way I think about it. I mean, I do know some people who are more competitive, certainly than I am. I just don't see the point in a lot of competition. Now, that said, I mean, I love things like the Olympics and other athletic events, but as you said, those events are largely these people competing against themselves
Hmm.
and people from other countries, but they're really just trying to best their own times more than anything.
Yeah, and they develop a camaraderie with their competitors. I've read tons of books on Olympism, they call it, the spirit of the Olympics. So even though they're competing, they're each challenging each other to be their best possible athletic selves, so
And from what I understand, the Olympic Village is hopping too in terms of people hooking up. There are all of these, professional, well, not professional, but there are all these athletes, around. They're all in great shape and they're young. So, from what I've read, it's pretty wild. Uh, but I can certainly understand why.
and now I learned something new. I never knew that.
Well, I never really thought about it, and I can't remember what I was watching, but they were interviewing somebody, and apparently it was quite the passion pit. So, and I can see how it would be. There again, these people are young, in terrific shape, probably at the peak of their own physical fitness.
And you have a movie idea there somewhere waiting to be born.
Is it going to be porn or
Well, it could be, or then something from the past in the Olympics. survives to this day and decides to seek vengeance against the modern Olympians for reasons we can only guess at until the very end of the movie when all is made clear.
You Americans really like love stories, and you might be able to take it in that direction. Do a romantic comedy.
There you go.
Um, Call it the Olympic Village or something like that, and then the protagonist hops from bed to bed, and then finally meets the one, and then the
Huh?
pursuit is on. Sounds like a Hallmark movie to me.
Yes, except R-rated.
Oh well, true, true. One other thing about Universal before I move on, they are building a third park in Orlando, which is supposed to open next year, and I'm really excited for it. I cannot remember the exact name for the new title. It's going to have a lot of superhero um, goings on, but there's also going to be a section of the park devoted to Universal monsters, and I am incredibly excited about that. Before the pandemic, at Universal Hollywood, um, there in Burbank, they used to have a Universal Monsters attraction, which was not a ride, it was a walk-through attraction, and it was exclusively staffed by actors. Some of the sets were just mind-blowing. I mean, Frankenstein's laboratory was just spot on. It even looked like it was in black and white. I don't know how they did it. And as you're walking through the ride, you get to see if you're lucky, you might get to see Dracula or somebody like that. The very last time we walked through it, which was probably, I don't know, 14 or 15 years ago, we walked through it, and just it was every bit as wonderful as I had remembered. And then all of a sudden, the Wolfman jumped out, and he looked really good.
Uh-huh.
Um, I never really found the Wolfman movies to be all that frightening, but he scared the crap out of me. And he looked so good. And it looks like where Larry Talbot, is walking in the Wolfman. There again, I don't know how they did the lighting and color, because as you're walking through, it's just, oh my God, I'm in Dracula's crypt. It was amazing. I hate that they took it out. They probably had trouble staffing because these people were good actors. You find that in a lot of amusement parks, especially the ones in Florida, well, in California too. You get a lot of frustrated actors um, who you get a role like that, and it's paying scale, but at least it's a job.
Right.
Um, but you never know. It could be a springboard. I think there are Patrick Swayze, I believe, worked at Disney World or Disneyland, excuse me, in California. I think he was in one of the shows back in the 70s at the amusement park. Steve Martin used to do magic tricks at Disneyland. He worked in one of the stores. He worked in a magic store in Disneyland. There's a lot of people came up that way. Um, so you actually can move on. And at the bigger amusement parks, you do have more live entertainment, live music. Sometimes it depends on the park, but sometimes you'll get decent bands. For example, last year at Epcot, we got to see the remaining members of ELO, Electric Light Orchestra.
Hmm.
They were really good. And the year before that, we saw the Village People. Most of the original Village People weren't in the show, sadly, but it was good. It was fun. And Peter Noon from Herman's Hermits does a lot of shows at Epcot as well. He lives somewhere in Central Florida. I'd probably say Orlando or something like that. And I don't know if you were a Herman's Hermits fan or not back in the day.
No, but I remember the name of the band, Hermit's Ordinance.
Yeah, they did a lot of novelty songs like Mrs. Brown, You've Got a Lovely Daughter, I'm Henry VIII, I Am. Uh, but I mean, some of their stuff was just standard pop for the 60s. And the thing that really impressed me was that, I certainly didn't hate Herman's Hermits. They were okay. But in terms of British invasion bands, they weren't the Beatles, you know. They weren't a blues band like the Stones. They weren't even the Kinks. They were just,
Hermit's Hermits. They were
yeah.
hermits.
And Peter Noon was incredibly young in the mid 60s when they were popular. I mean, he was like a teenager, like 15, 16 years old. So he's not as old now as you would think he would be, based on the number of, they had a lot of hits in the 60s. And when we saw him, I don't know, it was probably 3, 4, 5 years ago. What really impressed me is that he could still sing. Oftentimes older singers lose their voices. He hadn't lost his. He still sounded. I know his voice was never great, but he still sounded like Peter Noone. And he entertained really well. He was really good about getting the audience together and getting them up off their feet and participating and singing along and clapping. That's the thing I walked away with after his performance, is that he was really good at interacting with the audience and getting them excited about the show. I was very impressed by that. You have to be able to do that if you are an entertainer working in any venue. If you're in an amusement park like Peter Noone was, and he was legitimately in a band show. So
Uh,
I was just and to see really talented people. The Electric Light Orchestra performance that we saw last year would just blew my mind. It was that good, and I always liked ELO when I was a kid. Had, I don't know, 2 or 3 8 tracks of ELO. They were fantastic. Now Jeff Lynne unfortunately wasn't with them, but they used a couple of other singers, and they were pretty close to Jeff Lynne.
would you consider carnivals to be part of the amusement park?
Ooh, yeah,
Okay.
definitely. And case in point, for years, one of my duties in the position that I had at West Virginia University was creating and staffing our unit's state fair presence. We have a state fair in West Virginia. It lasts about a week and a half, and it's 2 weekends and then pieces of 2 different weeks. It's in the southern part of the state, but there is a carnival attached to it, and the carnival still has some of the old school, um, oh, what do you call it? Kind of the freak show stuff.
Yes, I remember those.
There's not a whole lot of it left, but there's still a little bit of it around still, which is kind of neat. I can remember going to carnivals as a kid, and my father took me into one. It was disgusting. It had these formaldehyde jars
Yes,
with.
I remember those the Palisades Amusement Park near.
It was
Two had
disgusting.
exhibits, and they had living ones too, and they had them in jars, and they had human embryos. I remember they had all sorts of things in the jars.
Yeah, and it was gross. I mean, I was kind of I didn't have nightmares over it, but I was kind of grossed out over it when I was a kid. A friend of mine that I used to work with many years ago when I was a webmaster. This is a terrible story. He was from southwestern Pennsylvania, and there used to be a lot of um, kind of local amusement parks up there.
Mhm.
And the one that was closest to wherever he grew up, which is not in existence anymore. This is terrible, by the way. They had this contraption with a chicken sitting or standing in it, and if you put some sort of like a quarter or something like that in the machine, you could shock the chicken and make it dance.
That is pretty horrible.
So it was called like the dancing chicken or something like that. So Frank told me that one of the things he liked to do in high school was to smoke a joint, get really stoned, and then go make the chicken dance
Oh,
at
God.
the amusement park. I know that's terrible, and I'm not laughing about animal cruelty. I just can't believe that, and that this is fairly recent, into our past.
Well,
Uh,
people now are torturing AI. I've been studying AI and the rise of the robots because that's going on, and it's gotten further along than I feel comfortable with. Um, but they have these things called AI girlfriends, which are
oh,
chatbots, and they become your friends, and I guess you have relationships with them virtually. but a lot of people are making YouTube videos where they're using these chat bots, these AI creatures. And it sounds very much like what you described with your friend the chicken. They're trying to throw them off. They're doing all sorts of things, and they're again packaging it as YouTube entertainment. So
One thing, yeah, I've had students who have tried to use chatbot or chat GTP in order to write assignments, and it's garbage.
is it?
Oh, it is. Whenever they do it, I can get 2 or 3 sentences in it and say this is AI. It's so easy to do. I got really frustrated with it last year. It they weren't getting anything over on me because we have rubrics. You have to reach certain benchmarks to get a certain grade, and the AI stuff was all crap because it didn't have anything specific in it and it didn't have any research in it for the most part. And we have specific databases that our libraries do that they were expected to use, and Chat GTP didn't have access to it. So it was painfully obvious. It was like it failed anyway, you know. But this year, and I'm going to be teaching the same course again in the fall, we're just going to own it. We're going to start them off with Chat GTP, with some forms of business communication, and I'm going to try to teach them how to then take this garbage that Chat GTP just spat out and turn it into something meaningful. You have to plug actual data because it won't have the data that you're looking for. And from what I understand, Chat GTP and other programs like that aren't going to get markedly better for a long time. It's always going to be junk. So isn't that wonderful to know?
Okay, again, I got a different perspective on it now because from what I've seen from YouTube videos, some of the robots seem pretty much interactive and intelligent.
Well, and that's another thing too. You can buy, well, we're not too far out from being able to buy robots that look, somewhat humanoid. I why? I'm just because you can do something doesn't mean you should.
But we live in a world of if you can do something, do it, and do it with a vengeance until it explodes.
But there again, why? I don't understand it. There are plenty of humans here to get to know and get involved with. I don't need a perfect, humanoid creature to interact with. I like imperfections.
Me too.
As much as I love this cat it's on my lap right now, and she's beautiful, by the way. She's looking at me instead of you guys, but she's really pretty. She is deeply flawed. Um, she's determined to be at the top of the totem pole in the house. Will challenge you or anybody else on any on any aspect of what she wants. And when she wants something, she is not going to stop. She is going to get it. She will continually throw bigger fits and act up more and more until she gets it, kind of like a spoiled child.
But like you said, it's imperfection. And one of the things I like about Greek mythology as a way of looking at the world is that everyone and everything, including the gods, are flawed. The universe
Flawed,
is flawed.
very, very flawed.
It
And
makes
that's the basis of drama, right?
right.
I mean, it's just human foibles. It's everybody has a personality flaw of somewhat, and that's the way of life too. I mean, I've got some great friends, and we're all flawed. I mean, they're wonderful people, but they're by no means perfect. She is by no means perfect, but I
Yeah.
but I love her mannerisms, and I like the fact that it's kind of inspiring, when you see a creature who has a goal, and like her, she's going to accomplish it. I'm serious. If she wants, let's say, some cat treats or something like that, she will get them, and if she doesn't, she's going to make my life hell. I'm serious.
I'm a long time cat person, so I know exactly what you're talking about. I have a Chihuahua. I'm very surprised the Chihuahua is not sitting in my lap right now, because usually when I do my podcast, she'll sit on my lap and start licking my nose or something. Today she hasn't, but who knows? She might not. But I love the Chihuahua to death too. But she's incredibly flawed too.
And that my whole point is this. Gosh, you wouldn't have any film noir, without flawed people. Um, and it's just kind of the basis for life. I mean, soap operas, geez, everybody on a soap opera had an Achilles heel. They're almost gone now, which is just really hard for me to believe. They were so popular.
For so long, yes.
Yeah, I mean, even when I was a teenager in the 70s and 80s.
Also,
Well,
Turns General Hospital.
well, when my mother went back to work full time, she was watching a certain number of soap operas, and this was, I don't know, mid 70s, I want to say. Um, I was probably 8, 9, 10 when she went back to work, and when I would get home from school or whatever, um, I was just sort of there, and no adult supervision or anything, but I also wasn't burning the house down. And we didn't have a VCR back then because practically nobody did, mid 70s. So she would instruct me to watch like a certain soap opera on a certain day. And then in the evening, at dinner, I would have to tell her what happened on X soap opera. And it really pissed me off at first. I was like, back then you only had 3 channels. There was only soap operas on in the afternoon.
Uh-huh.
But so it wasn't like I was like, damn, I could watch something else. But it was like, oh God, I hate, all these hospital things and such. And then I didn't real well, that's what I kind of expected, but I didn't realize how there were a couple of them that had kind of sleazy storylines here or there, probably things that kids probably shouldn't have been watching, maybe like with prostitution and drug addicts and alcoholics and
Yeah,
things like that.
we had TV that we don't have anymore.
Well, and it was really fun stuff. A lot of those old soap operas were headlined by once famous actors. Days of Our Lives, Francis Reed and McDonald Carey were the main couple, on the series, for decades. All My Children had Ruth Warwick. And that was sort of the pinnacle of her career. I mean, she'd been a character actress for years. She's in Citizen Kane, by the way.
Do you think
Uh,
your mother having you recount what happened on the soap operas influenced your life?
well, it probably did because I really started enjoying those soap operas after a while, and I did get to know. It used to be really hard to figure out who the actors were on the particular soap operas because if you did get like the cast credits or something like that, you only got them maybe once a week. You didn't get them every day.
Right.
Um, Now, Mom bought Soap Opera Digest at the time, and that was kind of helpful, without the internet, because it would it would give you the names of the actual names of the people playing whatever character on whatever soap opera. So that was helpful in that. And if they were, actors who had a lot of experience, they would run an article, every once in a while, like on somebody like Louis Edmonds, who had been on Dark Shadows.
Hmm.
Um, he's Joan Bennett's brother on Dark Shadows. So he was on All My Children into the later on into the late 70s, early 80s. A major character, by the way. Um,
My wife's really into Dark Shadows. She used to do the Dark Shadows convention. She was on one of the Collinswood players, and they used to do skits at the conventions. And
Somebody's acting up. I've
get
got
get,
to.
get him that cat treat.
She's trying to. Oops. She's trying to get my attention, and it worked. Yeah, you'll notice. She's no dummy. Anyway, yeah, I don't get the whole let's have all these perfect people. That sounds like Nazi Germany to me. I kind of like my. I mean, you don't want to be flawed when you're young. I don't know why. Everybody, well, seemingly most people want to conform when they're younger. As you get older, you don't give a shit anymore.
Very,
Um,
very true.
I didn't care a whole lot back in the day either, so I didn't have much to give up there. Uh,
Eccentricity for a while, they were trying to make it a psychiatric diagnosis. I worked in the mental health field for many years, and I read that with amusement because I am and have always been eccentric. So they were saying that eccentricity is like a chronic disorder and it's degenerative because the older you get, the more the more eccentric you get. So I couldn't argue with the logic, but fortunately for me, I guess, and for many other uh, different people, they never made it a disorder.
I know I don't think weird is a disorder. And to tell you the truth, most of the people I know are different. They're not run of the mill, they're not mainstream. And that's why I like,
Uh-huh.
quite honestly. So there again, it's the flaws are the flaws make your personality. Um, if you do conform in any way, shape, or form to whatever society is telling you, then you're not going to stand out at all. It sort of gives you color. It gives your personality color, certainly. And I will say this, though, I don't like flaws in amusement park rides
Very
because
good.
you can you can get trapped on them.
Yes,
We have been trapped on a number of rides over the years.
as of
This year, this year we got trapped on the Haunted Mansion at Disney. It broke down right as we were at the front door, and this was late at night too. It was around 10:30 or 11 o'clock, and the attraction never really did restart. Greg was really ticked off about that, but we had ridden it earlier in the day, and it is probably my favorite thing at the Magic Kingdom. The Haunted Mansion's done so well. It started out at Disneyland in the late 50s, and there was a Disney album that was put out in the 60s that I had when I was a kid that features a lot of the sounds in the old Haunted Mansion. A lot of those have been changed since then. But that kind of gets me to rides that have spawned films, and the Haunted Mansion is one of them. Actually, it has spawned two different films over the years. One was a 2003 movie with Eddie Murphy. I actually did see part of it because I wanted to see what they made out of the Haunted Mansion, and it was okay. I wouldn't watch it again. And there was another one in 2023, just last year, with Rosario Dawson, Owen Wilson, Lakeith Stanfield, excuse me, Tiffany Haddish, and Jamie Lee Curtis that I didn't know anything about until I started doing research for this. So I really want to see it. It sounds like it's got a great cast. IMDb's reviews of it aren't great, but I really like the cast, so I kind of like to see it. There are other films as well that have been born out of an amusement park ride. Pirates of the Caribbean is probably the most shining example of all, and the most successful, I would say. The series with Johnny Depp, I believe they made through two or three movies out of that. And the first one was very, very popular. It was so popular that Disney rethemed portions of the Pirates of the Caribbean ride. They put in a pirate that looked very, very strikingly similar to Johnny Depp and Jack Sparrow, his character, and he appears like throughout the ride. They redid it several, and they've made it more PC as well. There was a sort of a slave auction in the ride until rather recently, with young maidens being auctioned off to wealthy, horny pirates,
it's good. Yes.
and that was taken out of the ride. I would say within the last 7 or 8 years. It hasn't been that long. And there's there again, Disney is often accused of being woke and whatnot, but I can, a slave auction, ooh, and it's women too. That probably shouldn't be there anymore. I kind of agree. with
I
redoing that portion of it. I mean, I remember it, and I'm sure you can find it on YouTube somewhere. But I'm glad it's gone. Um, the I've never been in this attraction. It's one of my mom's favorites. When she used to go to Disney, she loved the Country Bear Jamboree. And it sounds like something that a child would, or an old lady would would appreciate. And I just never saw it. Although I've seen it online and it does look really cute. So maybe I'm getting to the age where I could enjoy it.
I've seen that on TV, a clip of it or two over the years.
Okay. I have not. Now, there's one ride at Disney that kind of does a little bit of everything, and that is the Tower of Terror. Um, that's an attraction, an older one at this point at Disney Hollywood Studios. And it's one of my favorite attractions, to tell you the truth, at the studios. It is based on the old Rod Serling TV show, um, The Tower of Terror. And it has, since it's themed kind of in the late 1930s, but somehow Rod Serling is narrating all of this, and you get to see images of him, here and there. Um, it's Twilight Zone. I should have said the name of the television show, but it is a Twilight Zone format. Now we know that that was late 50s, early 60s, but the ride is themed for the late 1930s. It's the Hollywood Tower Hotel, I believe that's what they call it, and it's essentially an elevator ride, but it's a thrill ride because the elevator jerks you in your car, up quickly. It'll drop you. It can go left to right. It can go forward and backward as well. It's essentially a car, and there's a track, in parts of it. Um, it's a lot of fun, and until fairly recently, I thought that as a ride, it was one of the ones that looked the best, in terms of being in an amusement park ride and being immersed in something. It's been eclipsed since then, but it's still a really fun amusement park ride, and it has been turned. Tower of Terror has now been turned into a TV movie.
Oh, wow.
So it's started with a television show, then a ride, now a movie, even if it was a TV, but still.
Is it a video game too? Because the Tower of Terror sounds like the name of a video game.
Well, it does. I'll give you that. And another thing I wanted to talk about tonight were films that were shot in amusement parks. I live about, I don't know, 75, 80 minutes away from Pittsburgh's amusement park, and that's called Kennywood. Um, Kennywood was owned by the Kenny family in Pittsburgh for like 100 years, until it was bought by a corporation. The corporation that bought it has occasionally latched on to certain characters. For a while, they had an old dark ride that they reformatted as a Garfield, the cat dark ride, where you're in one of the little boats. It's kind of like the Tunnel of Love, you know. But there are all these day glow paintings of Garfield and Odie and John and the other characters from the comic strip. It was such a lame ride. It just didn't do a damn thing. None of this stuff moved. It was just like plywood cutout paint. I mean, the graphics looked fine, but it was just kind of sad. Um, the Kennywood's they also have a little theater that is rigged with seats that can like jerk you and jiggle you, and you can get sprayed with water, you depending on the type of film you're watching. They had an attraction a couple of years ago using that theater. It was the Stephen King film from the late 80s, and it was awesome. It was a lot of fun to do that. And I was surprised that it was there in Kennywood because Kennywood is more I mean, it's not independently owned anymore. It's owned by a corporation, but it's a smaller amusement park too. A lot of the smaller ones, have gone away, but Kennywood's really thriving. They keep adding new stuff. They even have a new part of the park that they've devoted to aliens.
Oh, wow. I would like that.
They have alien themed attractions. And in fall and winter, usually amusement parks used to kind of end things after Labor Day. They don't seem to do that anymore. I know Kennywood has, their Phantom Fright Nights. It's their Halloween attraction, and that's like a solid month, 6 weeks. And then after that, they strip the park of all the Halloween stuff, and they decorate the whole park with Christmas lights and Christmas trees, dinners with Santa, all kinds of things like that. And at night, it's beautifully lit. It was a lot of fun. We went to the Christmas, and they have some of the, not all, but they have some of the amusement park rides, and that's kind of dependent on the weather. It's Pittsburgh, December weather. It might be 75 degrees, and we might have 2 feet of snow. Who knows? So, but they seem to be adaptable with it. And it's nice to see them keep the parks open longer. Places like Kings Island and Kings Dominion um, are doing that as well. And I read an article about Kings Dominion. It's been within the last year that Cedar Fair, which is the company that owns Cedar Point, Kings Dominion, Kings Island, a host of amusement parks across the nation. They're going to try to keep Kings Dominion, which is in the Richmond metro area in Virginia, open more or less year round. I don't know how that's going to work. We don't get much snow in this area now, and I'm only about 4 hours away from Richmond. It's just slightly southeast of here. Not sure how it's kind of cold. You're riding in let's say a roller coaster in the winter, depending on where you're at.
I can imagine.
All of the all of the roller coasters at Kennywood are typically open for Phantom Fright Nights because they're trying to get teens, into the park, and young adults, people who are hardy enough to be out in the cold. Sometimes Greg and I have been on some roller coasters at Kennywood where it's been like 39 degrees. You can see your breath, and the coasters are fast, and you're just essentially like, you're cold. And so much of Kennywood is outside, so there's no heat. You're just outside. It's not like the Disney parks where they have big pavilions, that are heated and air conditioned. Kennywood is not that kind of amusement park. But Kennywood also has a lot of vintage rides, rides that were once popular at a lot of regional amusement parks, but those parks are gone, and so are the rides. One of them is Noah's Ark, which is a very complex old ride. The building is shaped like an ark. It's big too, and it rocks. And you get inside, and there are lots of 1920s, 1930s kind of gags as you walk through it. There's a floor that vibrates and shakes. There's this is kind of dangerous, but there's a stairwell that goes down, but the Noah's Ark is rocking you back and forth like this, and you're trying to go down, and if you don't have very good balance, you can fall pretty easily.
So I would avoid that ride if I encountered it.
Maybe so, but it has some rides that are now over 100 years old, and in good working condition. They've been extensively refurbished, but it gets a lot of amusement park historians because they do have some of the last examples of particular rides that used to be popular. And Adventureland was shot in Kennywood. That's a 2009 movie with Jesse Eisenberg, who used to be in everything. Kristen Stewart, who used to be in everything. Ryan Reynolds is in it as well. Bill Hader. It's got a pretty interesting cast. It was an independent film, and It's supposed to be set in a rundown amusement park. So Kennywood was very careful in all of their promotional literature to say, well, we had to ugly up the park in order to shoot this movie. And I will say this, Kennywood is always a very clean park. Everything is in good working condition. Everything's painted every year. It's landscaped very nicely. It's not a ghetto park at all, but it was made to look like one for Adventureland. A fun movie though, and it's fun to see Kennywood kind of behind, some of the screen magic that's going on.
Now, we have 5 minutes left in our conversation. Do you
Okay.
want part 3?
No, but I do want to talk about a movie that I watched just today that I hadn't seen for a long time, and it's Roller Coaster. Roller Coaster is a movie came out in 1977 with George Segal, Timothy Bottoms, Henry Fonda's in it here and there, Harry Gardino. It was shot in 3 different amusement parks. One was the Ocean View Park in Norfolk, Virginia, right on the coast. It was torn down essentially right not too long after the Roller Coaster was shot there. Roller Coaster was shot by Richard Levinson and William Link. They were producers. And if you ever watched, let's say, The Night Stalker or Columbo, Murder, She Wrote, Got Mannix, they were the production team that turned out all of those TV shows. Some of the best stuff from the 70s, really. Ellery Queen, which was a show that I watched when I was a kid and loved it, with Jim Hutton and David Wayne. But this was one of only 2 feature films that they produced. The first one was The Hindenburg in 1975 with Anne Bancroft and George C. Scott. And Roller Coaster is all about Timothy Bottoms. He's kind of a disturbed young man, but he seems to know we think he's an engineer, and he knows how to make explosives, and he keeps planting them in amusement park rides and blowing people up. There's some spectacular scenes of it. It gets kind of talky too. The things that go boom, vignettes, scenes in the movie are great. It gets very talky with George Segal. However, he's supposed to be this brash upstart journalist, not a journalist, but brash upstart person who oversees the inspection of the amusement park rides, and it gets really tiring. That part of it gets dull after a while. But watch it for not George Segal, but watch it for Timothy Bottoms, who's really good at playing a creepy guy. He's good in this. And you'll watch it to see the old amusement park rides. It's also partly shot at King's Dominion in Richmond Metro, and Six Flags Magic Mountain in Valencia, California.
Thank you
Fun.
very much, Brian. And I'm sure more amusement park movies will come out. I don't remember the title of many movies that I saw, but the amusement park and the carnival are constant themes. So I'm sure we'll have a third part of this at one particular point. How can people find you and Brian's Drive-In Theater?
Well, one thing we could have mentioned was Carnival of Souls. We didn't even talk about that, but you can find me at Brian's Drive-In Theater, which is updated daily with a new movie of the day and the birthdays of the day as well. So come and see me at www.briansdrive-in-theater.com. If you want to interact with me on social media, I'm only interacting right now on Facebook. Instagram might happen in the future. We will see. But go into Facebook, look for Brian J. Walker or Brian's Drive-In Theater, and I'll pop up.
Thank you again, and thanks to our wonderful listeners. This will be on YouTube sometime tomorrow.